It's time for AggroChat, the official podcast of the Tales of the Aggronaut blog and stalwart gaming community, where we talk about stuff and things, and the stuff about the things, and sometimes gaming. I'm Belgast, and let's start the show. Hey folks, it's that time again, time for another episode of AggroChat. This is episode 311. Tonight I'm joined by Emo.
Lolly-ho.
Ashgar.
Hi.
Grace.
Hello.
Kodra.
Howdy.
Tam.
Hello.
And Thalen.
Hi there.
So, this has been a really weird year for lots of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But
It's been a really weird 10 years in a year.
Yeah. But, like, I've had really weird experiences with games this year. At least two specific games. One that is currently under NDA that I can't talk about, that I did not expect to enjoy when I got into a very publicized stress test, that I enjoyed the hell out of. Like, I enjoyed the hell out of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Another game that I was in the beta of this week that I was looking forward to and I thought I would enjoy, this represents the third game, I think, of all time that I have ever refunded on Steam.
Is that also under an NDA?
No, it's not. Avengers is not good.
Oh.
It is a really bad game.
That makes me sad.
Like I have literally I've refunded 3 games in all the time that I've had Steam. I don't remember the first one, but I know there was one. And then I refunded Skater XL, mostly because, like, for what I've never played Skate, and I thought it was going to be like a Tony Hawk in game, but no, it's miserable. So I refunded that. And their community was horrible when I asked about it. And then I have refunded Avengers. And I don't even know where to begin with this. So there's a lot of games that I enjoy that do not have particularly good story, but the moment-to-moment mechanics make up for it, and it's still enjoyable to play. Avengers is a game with reasonable story, but the moment-to-moment gameplay just is not good. Like, have you ever played an early game that's like in an alpha or early access, and you're playing a build where they've put in some systems and things are more or less functional, but nothing feels like it goes together? Like, the combat doesn't feel like it's actually interacting with the world. You're just hitting buttons and doing stuff. That's the state at which Avengers feels like to me, to where, yes, there are things going on, but the combat feels deeply unsatisfying.
The first time I didn't feel that way about an early access game was Grindia. So yes, I understand the feeling. Yeah,
like it's like, okay, so we did a build so that we can figure out the math of some of these systems, but like the combat's going to improve over time. Like, and as it gets closer to done, you know, attacks will have weight to them. Abilities will like feel like they actually connect. There's a bunch of just weird things going on. First of all, it's got a very zoomed in camera view, a la Warframe, which I don't love. And I realize that may just be a me thing, but it also has a very aggressive camera in that it is always trying to pull itself back to whatever it thinks you should be looking at. So you don't, and supposedly this could be turned off to some extent, but like it's apparently still there. So it gives this impression of the camera just being really wobbly. And like I've mostly experienced this in games that like just don't know what to do with the camera, so that they like are colliding with scenery and stuff and pushing the camera out of the way kind of feel. The other thing it does just aggressively is do like on-screen shake, to where like the entire screen is kind of rotating as you're supposedly doing these big, impactful attacks. But like it just feels nauseating.
So, I know very little about this game. What type of game is it?
It's kind of okay. Here's the problem is I'm not really sure what they were going for. I think they were trying to go for a looter shooter type feel, but it's instead of looter shooter, it's looter smashy.
A third-person action type game.
Third-person action beat 'em up. And it's not dissimilar to some of the stuff that's going on in like DC Universe Online, but the combat in DCUO feels better than the combat did in Avengers. The other problem that I had is it is saturated with QuickTime events while you're doing combat, in a manner that it feels like your light and heavy attacks don't really have much impact on combat. And instead, you're waiting on these 3 QuickTime events to cycle around when, and they're basically powers, but when you use them, it's like kicking off a QuickTime event. And movement also works that way. And
what?
Movement, a lot of times, like there are certain things that you have to do to be able to move through the environment. Like, so one of the major characters is Ms. Marvel. And, she basically has Plastic Man type abilities.
She
or
embiggens.
Mr. Fantastic, Yeah, she embiggens. And so there's this segment where there are bars in the ceiling and you have to swing across the bar. But it's a QTE that you have to hit while you're in air, and sometimes it didn't pop up, leading you just to drop to your death.
This problem has been solved.
Yes.
They solved it in the Spider-Man game because web swinging is the same thing.
Exactly. This is the thing.
Insomniac did an incredibly good job with that, and many Spider-Man games haven't.
Yes.
Right.
No, it took a while before it finally got solved, but it has now been solved.
Right. But there were a lot of times where like, oh, hey, I need to cross this gap. I really hope the game's not going to screw me and not pop up a QTE so that I can swing. Oh, look, I'm falling to my death now because for whatever reason, I jumped at the same angle I've jumped every time, but this one didn't pop up an event. I played around 2 hours, and that was really all I could handle. So I played through 2 big missions and did some of the on the helicarrier thing. The story's not bad. The story largely focuses around, so there's an initial mission that is like, here, this is a sampler pack of all the Avengers. Try them out. Whether or not you want to. You're going to have to play, I don't know, a few minutes of each of them. And it's it's supposed to be like a cinematic experience, but it feels real jarring that you're head hopping between characters constantly during it. So you start off with Thor, and then Thor does something and passes the baton off to Iron Man, and then you kind of play as Iron Man for a while, and then you pass the baton off to Hulk, and then Hulk isn't super responsive at all, and like it's hard. You're supposed to do this thing where you jump and grab onto the wall, and Hulk's leap doesn't always seem to leap exactly the same length at each time. So like it took me some getting used to. And the game has this mixture of deaths that you instantly recover from and just pop right back up, and deaths that trigger a loading screen. And there doesn't seem to be like rhyme or reason as to what is causing each of them. I am sure there is a technical reason behind it, but it feels weird that like, okay, I failed. Okay, sweet. I'm just going to try this again. And then I failed, and now I have to restart the entire segment over again.
Oh, that's not great feelings.
No. The gearing system is deeply confusing. You're collecting gear that has ambiguous properties and there is some kind of a resource system. I don't know how you increase your resource. Doesn't appear to be based on leveling. Appears to be something else. But you end up with a inventory full of gear that says you have insufficient resources to equip. So it's not just like a level rating or something like that. There is some MacGuffin that you're collecting that allows you to increase your chest pieces or increase your arm pieces.
Their early screenshots made it look like they had a resource system kind of like Warframe, in that you have a bunch of million different things that you could theoretically be picking up.
Yeah, but like I don't know. Like it's at no point in the first 2 full missions is it ever explained, other than the game keeps nagging you periodically saying you have stronger gear that's not equipable.
This game is very gear focused, but it's entirely single player.
So it has a multiplayer component. I did not get far enough to try the multiplayer component. From what I understand, it is kind of like a strike, to where there is a story mission that you're playing out with a team, but everyone has to be different Avengers characters. So if I'm playing Captain America, nobody else can play Captain America. So you have to get stuck with like Iron Man or whoever you want to play. So I don't know how that works. I don't know if like there's a lock-in system that fastest finger wins, or are you queuing as a specific champion? I don't know. I was mostly interested in the single player campaign because it does have story and it's not bad. The thing that I thought was going to throw me for a loop and be really jarring is the fact that the characters that you're playing aren't from the comic and aren't MCU, but they kind of look like, I don't know, the soap opera version of the MCU characters.
It's been commented on a number of times.
It's a thing that I've seen a lot in the mobile games where they look like imposter versions of the MCU characters.
They're the stunt doubles.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I feel like...
Yeah.
So when I saw the trailer for this, my reaction was, I think this works in the other games because it's less like you are seeing the character at a further distance. Like they're usually isometric.
Yes. Well, in the Spider-Man game, you mostly see him in the suit. So like it's not an issue where like, oh, this is jarringly not the Peter Parker I'm used to looking at.
Yeah.
Whereas instead we have Thor instead of Thor.
Well, and also we've had like 8 live action Peter Parkers at this point.
It's
so,
true. Like we're very used to seeing Spider-Man be different people.
I was also going to say, I think the Thor I saw was disconcertingly close to the Thor from MCU.
Exactly. It was so close that you're expecting it to be the MCU one, but it's not. And it just feels jarring. Like, I think they would have been better off if they had just taken kind of the classical look from the comics and based them on that instead of this sort of MCU look. But anyway, like I was saying, I thought that was going to be a major problem for me. And it wasn't. Like, I really enjoyed... there's a lot of back and forth between Bruce Banner and Kamala Khan because like that's the story is being told through the point of view of Ms. Marvel,
which is perfect because part of her thing is that she's a huge superhero fangirl before she ever gets her powers.
Right,
like she's the ideal audience like point of view character, and
they nail that because she's playing kind of the role that Peter Parker did in the MCU, where she's this exuberant, lovable character that we're taking the role of. Like, that's us in this scenario. And that works really well. But the game itself just feels awful. And, like, I realize this is a quote-unquote beta, but the problems that exist aren't fixable in a week or two when this launches. Like, this is core combat problems that I do not think is fixable unless they just nuke the combat system and start from scratch.
Yikes.
I mean, the moment-to-moment gameplay just doesn't feel fun. I will probably watch a playthrough of some of the story content because the story was enjoyable. Like, I could get into the story, but I just couldn't play through it. Like after a couple hours, I just didn't want any more of it. I just couldn't.
This is also one of those things where I'm not sure how much just a little bit of forgiveness in the engine might make things feel a little better. Not even a little better, a lot better. Like, you were talking about how QuickTime events were like, you felt like you should get a QuickTime event but didn't. That actually makes me wonder if they could just increase the range on some of those QTEs.
And maybe.
But the stuff with the camera concerns me.
Yeah, the camera did not feel good. Like what it ended up feeling is it felt like it was unresponsive, because like it didn't move. Like, okay, so say you're spinning your mouse, it didn't move fluidly like you would expect camera look would move. It was an approximation of a direction, and I realized like Anthem kind of had some problems with that early on, so maybe that might be fixable. But I don't know that the actual combat itself would be fixable within the time frame. It really feels like a game that probably needed about another year's worth of baking, because it kind of feels like they're at the combat tuning phase now, where they really need to devote a lot of time to making the combat feel good. But I don't think that's going to happen in a couple weeks, because it launches September 4th. So right around the corner. And the thing is, it's not just me that's making comments like this, but apparently, I mean, there was a whole wave of these comments after the PS4 beta, which was exclusive last weekend, and it doesn't feel any better on PC. And I know of 4 or 5 other people that refunded the game that they were looking forward to it, played it, and had similar response that I did. So I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your mileage may vary. Like, it may feel fine to you, but
I mean, it sounds like they were going for God of War and didn't quite hit it.
It is like
old God of War.
Well, okay, so playing as Thor feels like a technically inept version of the modern God of War game. Because, that thing where Kratos throws the axe and then calls it back.
Yeah.
Thor does that with a hammer.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work anywhere near as well as it does in God of War.
Oh.
Like, if it played as well as God of War, I would have been all about it, because like I really enjoy the combat in God of War. The modern Dad of War. Or Father of Son, whichever way you want to call it.
This whole thing makes me wonder about the idea of demos and betas in general.
Extra credits, we did weigh in on this years ago. But I feel like there's a very successful example very recently in the form of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, where
I think a lot of people played that demo and got interested in the game.
Yeah.
I was significantly more interested after playing that demo.
So, Square is one of the few companies that regularly makes demos for their games nowadays.
And this is also a Square game.
I guess that's fair. I hadn't
Avengers
thought
is
about
a Square
that.
game.
I forgot about that.
It's developed by Crystal Dynamics, but it's published by Square Enix.
Yeah, all right. So I guess they are familiar with the good outcomes and then less good outcomes.
Yep. Well, maybe they can. Maybe when it fails miserably, they can take it offline for a while, completely rebuild it, and have a success.
Yeah, it
worked once.
It's worked more than once now.
Well, and I commented on Twitter with one of my hot takes that basically I would call this the Anthem of this year, except for Anthem was a really fun game.
Oh.
Like, it really was a fun game. It had great gameplay. It just was lacking something to do at the end of the great gameplay. This is like, it's got a reasonable story. Like, I think the story is going to be interesting. I will probably watch somebody's playthrough video of the story, but yeah, I don't want to play it. do not want to play it. Okay, Kodra.
Okay.
You found Sudoku games?
So actually, friend of ours, Void, recommended me download Good Sudoku, which apparently this guy is a pretty well-known app dev, but it's a Sudoku app by Zach Gage, who made Bad Chess. I don't know if anyone's familiar.
No.
But, so Good Sudoku is an app that is going to always offer you a hint button. And if you press the hint button, it is going to try and find a logical trick that it's wanting to teach you inside of Sudoku, and then how that allows you to get one step forward. So frequently, you can find you find Sudoku games that will let you fill in the grid, and then if you get lost, the only way to figure it out, if you don't know all of the tricks, is to just sort of jam numbers in until you get to a correct solution, or find a contradiction. This game is all about ensuring that there is something that you can be looking for inside of the puzzle to solve it, which I really appreciate. They have tiers going from beginner all the way up to impossible, and the impossible are actually pretty challenging. They usually ask you to look for a number of different techniques that you normally don't see in most algorithmically generated puzzles. The puzzles are still, though, all algorithmically generated, it looks like. But because I've been getting into Sudoku, I've been doing this. It has an on-ramp to get from beginner to advanced, and to learn the techniques you should be looking for to increase your Sudoku game. So if you're interested in it, I'd recommend checking it out. It's a really good interface, really clean design. I like it a lot.
Cool.
It also has a daily mode where you can they have daily puzzles, so I've been enjoying those. It's actually only came out in July, I think. But I have been competing with other people for leaderboard spots. I managed to get a top four. I got fourth place on one day, and I was very proud of it. The other Sudoku app, though, that I've been playing around with is a Miracle Sudoku, which is by Cracking the Cryptic. And it's based off of the Sudoku video they released that sort of skyrocketed their channel because it went viral. And it was a Sudoku that had only 2 given digits, and then a number of constraints that would allow those 2 given digits to resolve into a uniquely solvable puzzle. And it's all around the idea of having Sudoku puzzles where adjacent numbers cannot be orthogonally adjacent to each other. Consecutive numbers cannot be orthogonally adjacent to each other. So you can't have a 1 next to a 2 or a 2 next to a 3. And those are non-algorithmically generated puzzles, which means that they can be designed to require you to use even more different types of logic, and I've been having fun getting started with that as of last night. But yeah, lots of puzzle solving, lots of people creating new puzzles. There's a vibrant community of people who are working to churn out new and interesting puzzles for people to solve. So I've been enjoying the Sudoku community and just wanted to give a recommendation for those 2 apps.
Okay. I think it was last week that we kind of took some of the topics out of intended order. And I think one of them actually was designed to go with this topic. So I think this is one of yours, Tam. 40K 9th edition.
So, yeah, I mean, it's not news to anybody. It's 40K. They're doing a new edition. It's about basically exactly when everybody expected. And it's interesting to watch the cycle repeat, because it really is a frequently repeating cycle, where just like every so often there's a new game. Like you need to they take the game that they had before and they release a new version of it. And It reminds me of patching existing game content, but it's also really interesting to see, the very, very conservative, very like slow moving Games Workshop kind of start to try to catch up with everybody else. And it's really interesting to me because the new edition is making a whole bunch of really big changes, more subtly than the last one. It's not like, oh, we completely changed the way stat lines look. But it's also like they're changing the core functionality and the baseline of like what is a Space Marine. And I don't think that's happened in like decades.
Yeah.
And it's really, really interesting to me to see how they handle that. Because it's like, okay, what are they trying to accomplish? Like, what are the goals? What are the things that they're doing? And why are they making the changes that they're making? But it also is like, it's really interesting to look at them because I think of minis games as very similar to MMOs in a lot of ways because they're so dependent on the patch cycle. Like the next big thing on an MMO is when's the next patch coming out? And if you've got models that you've had for, 30 years and they're still supposed to be good and playable, like that requires a totally different game design than almost anything else. And I'm super fascinated by how exactly do you take a physical game in the age of digital games? How do you take a physical game and make it compelling and not get stale?
So this is the 9th edition, which means it's the first edition after 8th, the only one that we thought was a good game. So I'm kind of curious if they've continued on with the game design principles put forth into 8th edition.
They very much have. Like this is, and they're leaning even more into it than they were before.
Okay, so it's still designed to be a fun game and not necessarily an engine to recreate the Battle of Terminus.
Yes, and I think that it's a huge improvement, and they seem to have learned over the last, few years of the last edition that like, oh, if you're making a game to be a game, you need to be on the ball with your rules. Your rules need to be clear and crisp. The rules in 8th edition were like 7 pages long, which is nice and concise, but also leaves a lot of like open questions. Even in an exception-based rule set like many minis games are. But 9th edition has expanded that to like 25 or 30 pages, but they're all like clean. They're much better written than I've ever seen before, which is cool to see. And then also they're just functional. And they released an FAQ that was like, oh, hey, here's some updates. And then 2 weeks later, they were like, whoa, okay, that doesn't work. Let's fix that again. We need to FAQ our FAQ because there was an unintended interaction that they just didn't foresee. But that dedication to like actually updating and actually upgrading their rule set is definitely new, especially in minis games. So it's, I don't know, I find it really interesting to go to see what they're...
Well, so they used to... Okay, so in the past, there were 2 magazines, and I cannot remember the name of the Black Library magazine. It was a small digest format magazine. And then obviously there was White Dwarf, and they would use them for 2 separate purposes. So White Dwarf was the magazine that they released rules for new miniatures. And then this Black Library publication was oftentimes where they would release rules for old miniatures that just don't exist anymore but still are playable. Like, for whatever reason, I loved playing with the Judge Dredd miniatures, aka Adeptus Arbites, and they were never in the official rules. So you'd have to go find some issue of this Black Library magazine and dig out the rules of how to play them in whatever the new edition was of Warhammer 40K. And that was sort of how they handled, quote unquote, patching the rules. And a lot of stuff never actually made it into a real publication, but you would have to dig around in the dross of Warhammer, articles to find the rules you needed to play something. And it wasn't real successful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I mentioned the companion app and how shockingly garbage the companion app is. But there's other apps that other people have made that are, if not great, then at least very functional. And getting new rules and having them actually be like well thought out is nice. Because previously I've seen them push out rules where they're like, we thought this was cool, go have fun with it. And it's like, this doesn't work at all.
I mean, they sort of just did that for their other game.
Yeah, this is true.
I will admit those rules are not like completely broken, but
well, so that was actually really interesting. That was a really interesting thing that we tried, because I played with a friend and we both had those new units and we were expecting it to just be absolutely broken, and then they weren't. They were actually fine to both of our surprise. And it's interesting that something that was even like, something that was relatively questionably functional. Like we looked at that and I mean, Ash, you and I and our friend talked about it before.
Yeah.
And we're like, yeah, this is clearly broken. There's no way this is reasonable, but it might be fun to mess around with. And then I was, like I said, to my great surprise, it was more or less fine.
I always thought that like maybe they used the wrong paradigm for Warhammer miniatures, in that if you buy a unit of something, it should come with like a little pamphlet of the rules for that thing you just bought.
Other games have tried that, and that has the problem of not being terribly patchable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's absolutely...
Or requiring a lot of work to address rules changes in.
Yeah, I mean, your like War Machine absolutely agreed with you that you should get the rules when you buy a mini. And for a long time they did, but then when they updated their rule set or needed to patch something, they can't just like go and update all the cards in the old setup. It's really, really interesting to me to think about like when you've got a physical game like that, like how do you keep up with that? I
still kind of hope somebody figures out how to create a bridge of a like digital assisted minis game.
In what sense?
You mean more than Chorus Belly is doing, right?
I actually am not super familiar with what Chorus Fist Belly is doing, but where like I guess the idea would be you would need to use their app, and their app will like let you know, oh, you get this. This is the like at least if you had an app for list making, then that would be how you would get updates to units.
I mean, what would be really cool is to have, I don't know, like, I mean, you could go multiple directions with this, but basically the amiibo concept for miniatures to where you download an app, you set the miniature on the app. If it's like a barcode or something on the bottom of the base, or if it's, an NFC tag, then you'd obviously, that gets weird because you have to, where that is located on every device is different. But you would basically get a pop-up of all the rules associated with the miniature when you scanned the miniature.
Yeah, and there's some like, I don't know, it's not the same by any stretch of the imagination, but there's some amount of, app-assisted play. Like when I'm actually sitting down to play a game, like I'm sitting there with a tablet that has all of my unit rules on it. I'm not flipping through books. Like, no way. And it makes the game way more playable while still having that like that tactile feel. Like it's not just it's not doing the thing where like, oh, yes, I'm playing a game, but like all of the physical parts of the game are really just like there to look pretty and aren't meaningful in any way. Because I've seen that done where it's like, oh yeah, we made a what's the word I'm looking for? We made a game that just has like regular minis that you use, but really, like when you're sitting there playing the game, like the miniatures and the board aren't. You could play it just as well with little bits of cardboard, or just nothing at all because it's all in the app. It might as well, but just be a mobile game at that point.
I mean, this isn't a like tabletop game, but a prime example of that is, I can't remember the name of it, but that game with the swappable ship parts that came out for where like realistically you're better off just to buy the digital one that has all that stuff already, so you don't have to deal with Starlink, so you don't have to deal with fiddling with the bits or trying to track down the toys.
It just wasn't, there was no reason to care about it.
Whereas like for a miniature game, I could see making like a sticker that you put on the bottom of your miniatures that has like capacitative paint in a certain pattern, so that if you stick it on the touch surface of a tablet, it would recognize, oh, okay, well, it's this pattern, and now I can know what unit you just dropped on my tablet, so that you could get a pop-up of all the rules associated with it, and like maybe even templates. Or what would be really cool is if you used RFID and basically it was an AR app to where it would draw the like effect templates on the table for you.
See, all I'm thinking of now is that old PS2 game, Eye of Judgment, I think it was.
Yes.
Yeah. I never knew if that was any good.
Fancy cards and a camera.
I think that was a PS3 game.
The PS3 game? Yeah, I guess it was a PS3 game.
I don't know if it was any good. I just saw it in the store. It seemed like a lot of nonsense to get into.
They put out a mobile version, so I got our mobile PSP version or something like that. So I like it. Not the best game, but it was interesting.
There was a lot of let's make a digital Magic the Gathering without getting sued.
Yeah.
Yes.
What? You mean Hex?
I mean,
Hex got sued.
Hex is real close.
Hex was close enough to get sued, but also Eternal, which was not close enough to get sued.
Oh, and Eye of Judgment, similar kind of deal.
Eye of Judgment was at least a different game mechanically.
I mean, I feel like Eye of Judgment was more Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, from what I remember.
It was its own unique territory control. It was kind of like Triple Triad, honestly, more than anything else. It had its own unique thing, and once you controlled more than half the board, you won.
I think, like, as we said last week, the whole selling of a rules book thing feels like it's an outdated concept, since most of these games really just want you to buy miniatures, and buying the rule book feels like it's double dipping.
Yeah, well, I mean, and that's the way Corvus Belli with Infinity views it. It's like, look, all of our rules are free online. If you want some extra fiction, you can totally we'll sell you the rule book, and we're very excited to do that. But you don't need the rule book to play. But making it easy, and I think I've talked about this with Infinity, and it's true in the newer, these last couple of editions of 40K and in Age of Sigmar, where I can easily hop on an app and tweak some things and put stuff together in a way that I find interesting. That gets me to buy miniatures that I otherwise wouldn't. Like, I wasn't likely to pick up, I wasn't likely to pick up, this faction or this unit, but the fact that I can put together a list and then immediately imagine what that would be. It's like, oh, well, I only need to make this one box purchase, and then I can put this list together, and this looks like fun to play. It gets me to buy a bunch more stuff that I otherwise wouldn't. Whereas if I needed to, if the buy-in to try this new thing out was, I actually need to buy a book, and I need to buy these rules for it, and I need to this, that, and the other, then I'm much less likely to actually try to do that. I don't necessarily want to spend all of this time. I don't necessarily want to spend all this time figuring out and time and money just to find out if I like a thing.
Well, and I think that was what really was the selling point of a lot of the WizKids Click mini games, was you could just buy the miniatures and it had all the relevant rules on the base.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of.
That, and also they were, much less expensive and didn't require painting before you could use them, and you could just buy the minis and immediately use them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it had all of the rules in the form of arcane symbols that you needed another set of rules to interpret.
Colors. They're just colors.
Yeah, but I remember when... What was the first one of their games? I can't think of it. Mage Knight?
Mage Knight? Yeah.
I remember when Mage Knight was big, there were pamphlets that you could just grab from the game store that had explanations. So that all you needed to do was buy a pack of miniatures and you were able to play. Because we had those laying around the shop. And I also remember... God, I can't think of the name of the game. It was futuristic, or it was it was a noir era plane combat.
Are you thinking of?
I know the one you're talking about. I don't remember the name.
It was also an Xbox game, and I can't think.
Crimson Skies.
Crimson Skies.
Yeah,
yes.
Crimson Skies.
Yeah, Crimson Skies was similar. You basically just bought a squadron pack, and there was a card that came in the squadron pack that gave you the basic rules that you needed to play. So yeah, I mean, it was a really low barrier of entry.
Yeah, and there's a whole other rabbit hole on those games. Feel different to me than put them together craft miniatures games do.
Is that because you buy them fully assembled and painted?
It's partly that. I mean, that definitely takes a big portion of it out from me. It's not just that, but it is significantly that.
But I've always felt like that was kind of a challenge for Warhammer as well, in that there's probably a lot of people that would be interested in playing if it was just buy something off the shelf and immediately play, not I'm going to now get indoctrinated into this hobby that involves me assembling these little people and painting them.
Mm-hmm.
And usually or quite frequently get judged for how well you're able to paint them.
I mean, Warhammer definitely has a word. It's a game where, when you decide if you decide you want to play Warhammer, okay, well, maybe in a month or two you can actually play. That's the reputation.
Right. And I have friends that did not want to do the painting, so they would field miniatures that they had gone home and taken a can of spray paint and spray painted them all one color. And that was their army. They were just spray painted one color because, they had to have paint on them to play in the tournament. But it didn't say about quality of paint.
I don't think I have a whole lot of interest in playing Warhammer tournaments, but I have fielded so far entirely unpainted armies.
Maybe they have changed that, but there used to be specific rules about you can't play with bare minis.
Their tournament rules or whatever, but I'm not intending to play any tournament ever in a Games Workshop store. So that part's kind of whatever.
Yeah.
But I remember our local game shop, in order to maintain accreditation to do tournaments, if there was a tournament, they had to follow all those rules, just like it was a Games Workshop store.
I mean, the other thing is that not all my minis for Games Workshop games are Games Workshop minis, so it's not like I'd be able to play in tournaments anyway.
Yeah, that was me too. I borrowed minis from all over the place. I mean, I liked a lot of the Heartbreaker Mutant Chronicles miniatures and used them as Space Marines.
I mean, I got into Beasts of Chaos because some other company was producing Minotaur figures I liked.
I will say, and granted, this was an Age of Sigmar, but it seems like there are some tournaments where the rules on what you're allowed to bring to represent your army are very, very lax.
The official Games Workshop rules require you to have a Games Workshop mini to represent your mini. It does not require it to be the correct mini in basically any circumstance. It just has to be a Games Workshop mini.
There's also Games Workshop also has a very long-standing tradition of not really caring about competitive play in anything resembling any way at all until the last few years.
Yeah.
And so it was like, yeah, okay, so Games Workshop sanctioned events have to abide by these rules, but who actually cares? Because like it's not relevant. Like it doesn't actually mean anything to have your tournament be officially Games Workshop sanctioned.
Yeah, there was some clause where the store could not organize a tournament. Players could, on their own, come in and organize a tournament.
Yeah.
I'm sure that loophole was, never taken advantage of. Certainly not.
Well, I mean, almost all of the major tournaments are not run by Games Workshop. It's not like Corvus Belli, where Corvus Belli like has tournament packs. And the tournament packs for their games are, hey, here's an actually good reason to want to have a officially sanctioned tournament. I mean, they also way less restrictions on what that means, starting with you don't actually have to paint anything, and they don't really care what minis you play. And they're super upfront. I mean, the thing that you need to do for an Infinity tournament is you need to be registered with their league system, their league play system, and provide them your lists. And they're really transparent about like, hey, we ask for this because knowing what people are playing and how they do in tournaments helps us design. So like, yeah, they ask for some player data.
Yeah.
But it is really interesting. I mean, I still find it fascinating to see like, okay, so you could have a video game. What does it take to keep people interested in a video game when, you don't have a lot of, when you literally can't keep up with the games, the speed of patching and, the UX and so on. It's like the only thing that a minis game does that you can't do elsewhere is the hobby aspect. And not everybody likes that. And so it's interesting to see them kind of streamline it.
Okay, so this next one, I think, is kind of brand new news. Kodra, was this your topic on Warframe?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of us are playing Warframe, but TennoCon happened online, and one of the things announced is a new system called the Helminth, which is some disconcerting infestation of your ship. Where
it's a weird fish that lives in your ship.
I mean, it's been a disconcerting infestation in your ship for some time now.
Yeah.
But there's a new system associated with it now.
And now you feed your old Warframes to it, and you can take the abilities of those Warframes and apply them to your other Warframes. So now you can slightly customize the kit that your Warframe has. This does not seem balanced at all.
This also seems like here's a reason to keep farming those things other than to sell them.
Yep.
This is definitely a reason to refarm all of the basic frames in the game, or many of the basic frames in the game.
So once you've consumed it, like, do you get to keep its bits, or do you have to consume one each time you want to add something to a new frame?
You get to keep it. Once you've consumed it, the Helminth learns whatever ability that Warframe has, and you can customize it onto your other Warframes as much as you want.
Okay. That sounds significantly better than I was afraid it was going to be.
I know.
No. Building a Warframe is kind of expensive, and I would not like to do that repeatedly.
But notably, they will not let you feed Prime versions of Warframes to the Helminth, which means you have to get these Warframes the honest way. That's more of a...
Or buy them.
Oh, I guess I guess you could just buy them.
You can just buy base Warframes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Twitch has given me a lot of Warframes.
Twitch has given you a lot of Prime Warframes.
Yeah, Twitch gives you Prime Warframes.
Twitch's recent one was an Ember, not Prime, I think.
I think maybe they did give, like, I think I have a spare Rhino from Twitch.
Farming Rhino is at least pretty easy.
From some time long ago, farming Rhino is very easy.
It ain't, for example, farming Hydroid, or farming Equinox, or farming Nidus.
I am very excited for this because the Warframe I enjoy playing the most is missing one key thing that I've always kind of wished she had, which is an ability that deals damage.
However, the Warframes that the abilities they selected to take off of each Warframe they vary in power a lot. It is definitely notable that none of the big damage abilities are on this list. And of the damage buffing abilities, you can only use them to replace another damage buffing ability.
Oh, what does that mean?
Rhino's Roar and Mirage's Eclipse are the only ones they included in that system. And it means that you can only use them to replace a damage buffing ability. You can't give them to a Warframe that doesn't have a damage buffing ability.
So I could not take those on Trinity.
Correct.
Is overlapping damage buffs like the meta?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It is the thing they were most concerned. Like, it is the one concession to balance they have made in this system.
That's fair, I suppose.
Like, the meta in Warframe has always been, how many things can we stack in such a way that we are doing, tens of thousands of % extra damage?
And you should just play Chroma. But they brought that one in
that's
line.
also the meta in Diablo 3.
Yeah.
I mean, Warframe and Diablo 3 are similar
They
in a
kind
lot
of
of
have
ways.
a lot in common, really.
Blizzard just, leaned into it completely, though. It's like, okay, yeah. Start putting set abilities on things that increase damage of a particular ability by 4,000%.
Big numbers are fun.
It's true.
It's true.
I clearly am not playing at those levels, so I'm just excited that I can change out the one healing well, which I never ever press, for a button that blows something up.
The hilarious thing about Well of Life that I've said all along is that would be an amazing ability on a Warframe that isn't Trinity.
Sure, and now somebody else you can have it.
Now you can put it on somebody who isn't Trinity.
And Trinity can give it away because she doesn't need it. Like, Trinity is incredibly happy with her kit of the feedback, the giant AoE heal, and the thing that ends up giving all of your energy back.
I don't even know what I would take away or add to the only Warframe I've ever really liked.
Excalibur?
Yep. I feel like Excalibur has... I
think Excalibur's weakest ability is probably Radial Javelin. Even then, that's not a bad ability.
Yeah, I always thought Excalibur had a pretty balanced kit and a fairly self-sufficient kit.
Excalibur is one of the few Warframes from that era that I think actually has a complete kit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always bummed that I could never, ever get Prime.
You can get Umbra now.
Which is sort of Prime.
It's got gold bit.
I mean, that's how you can tell something's Prime, right?
Yeah.
There's too much gold in it.
Because it looked like the Orokin vomited on it?
Yep.
I think Umbra looks slightly better than that, but yes.
Yeah, well, because Umbra is like a charcoal gray, isn't it?
Baseline, yeah.
Gold bits.
Yes, the base color is black with gold bits and not white with gold bits.
It looks really cool.
One of the things I noticed is that, I mentioned this a little earlier, none of the major damage abilities made this list. Also, no Warframe Ultimates made this list.
When you say major damage abilities, what are you referring to there?
Things like Nidus's one, Vauban's big giant nail gray, any ability that does large amounts of damage by itself.
I mean, I feel like there are some abilities that do a decently sized chunk of damage. There are a lot of Warframe's ones that are on there, like Smite or Shock or a bunch of other of those types.
Most of those abilities are bad, and I would instantly replace them.
It is possibly telling that the thing is that I'm playing on a Warframe that already is going for max ability strength, that almost anything that deals damage is going to be impressive on the Trinity I'm running. I need a Warframe that I need an ability that will turn that into real damage.
You may be surprised and or disappointed at the results of those abilities with some power strength.
Okay.
It's the problem Ember used to have.
I still think Nezha's Fire Trail is funny.
That one has some merits. Smite does actually have some merit, because Smite does damage based on the health of the thing you hit. But you can't... In order for an ability that does damage to be good, it has to either have a large percentage of something behind it, or it has to be basically moddable.
What do you mean by moddable?
Korra's one, Atlas is one, Gara's one. I'll take the mod on your equipped melee weapon. and so scale as well as melee weapons do. Or Nidus, who's getting like a times 100 multiplier on the damage of his wand.
Is there not really a great just blasty caster Warframe?
Ember is that now. It used to be. Honestly, though, the best Warframe for doing damage with abilities is currently Nidus.
I think Saren is pretty good about that.
That's true, although I'd argue that's a little different.
I mean, fair.
But there's a lot of interesting builds that this opens up, and a lot of interesting paths you can take your Warframes. I'm excited.
They did decide to lock this behind Master Rank 15, which is probably not coincidentally also the highest requirement to use any weapon in the game. So this is what they consider endgame eligible, I guess.
I mean, I still find it amusing how many tiers past 15 there are.
I mean, there are 15 tiers past 15, technically.
How many can you actually get to now?
I think the current cap is 29.
Oh, wow. They've added a lot since I've dipped my toes in. The last time I was in, it was 27, I think.
The cool weapons added a lot, especially since they have 40 ranks each.
Wow. This game's way of progression is still hilarious to me. This is actually kind of tangential. It's one of those things where I'm really fascinated by something that says, in order to gain XP, you need to not do anything, you need to do specific things. Like, you are on the hunt for XP, as opposed to XP just being something you stumble over as you do stuff out in the world.
I usually think of Master Rank in Warframe being the reward for breadth rather than depth.
Yeah. It's also interesting seeing a game that wants you to go that broad.
I feel like most games want you to go that broad, but do not encourage it.
Yeah. It's like it's what they want to do, but they're not good at actually incentivizing it.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see what abominations of balance people come up with for this, though. I think Tam is correct in that Nullstar is going to go on some arty tanky frame and make them completely invincible.
What does Nullstar do?
It's Nova's one, which makes Nova fairly tanky by itself.
But Nova is not an innately tanky Warframe?
Correct. So on, like, say, Excalibur, this ability would just be completely stupid.
Or Atlas. Or Rhino.
Not taking damage to his health, so I'm not sure it would work. But yeah, Atlas would. Atlas absolutely would.
So I don't think we have enough time to get into the next topic. However, I do have one real quick thing that shouldn't take too terribly long. So I talked about Avengers not being great. Another game I got into the demo for this week is Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 Remaster on the PC. The warehouse level demo. They did a good job. Like, it is Tony Hawk Pro Skater. Like, there's some weird design choices where if you crash instead of, like, standing back up, it does this weird rewinding time kind of warp thing, which is a style choice. Folks have been joking that it's because Tony Hawk is old now and he can't get up very quickly. So they're warping him instead.
Makes sense.
Tony Hawk makes a lot of noises, like more noises than I remember. And again, Tony Hawk's older. We all make weird groans now. It feels faster than I remember Tony Hawk Pro Skater. But then again, like, it's been a really long time since I've played one of these games.
The engine is apparently based on everything you could do in Tony Hawk's Underground.
Possibly.
Like one of the later games.
There's a lot of things
more than you can do in THPS 1 and 2.
Right. Like, there's a lot of things. Like, okay, so one of the things that used to always be annoying is if you failed to do a trick and just slammed into the wall, you'd lose momentum or whatever. Now, apparently, you can kick off the wall, which feels really weird. Like, it's cool, and you get points for doing it, but you basically just like, I'm just going to kick off the wall now and go the other direction. Like, grinds are just as good as always. Like, slowly, bit by bit, my muscle memory started coming back. And I was landing, chains of tricks and stuff. it is definitely going to be a good spiritual successor to the Tony Hawk franchise.
I'm really excited. Apparently Goldfinger has been doing music videos from quarantine. So I've been listening to a lot of them over the past week. So
they have an interesting feature where you can set your own playlist.
But they got almost everyone who's in the first two games back.
Right, but like if all you want to listen to is Superman over and over and over, you can do that. You can only have Superman in your playlist.
Sounds good to me.
Like the demo only has, I think, 4 tracks. But like it's got Superman, so that's the quintessential Tony Hawk song to me. I think it is to most people. I mean, it's got build a park mode, and like you'll be able to share parks with people online. Like it feels like all the things that I remember about the game are at least stubbed out to where you can see them in the interface. You can't play them; you can only do the warehouse in the demo. But I'm on board. I tried to play with mouse and keyboard, and it's not doable. At least not without significant key remappings. Because whatever they have as the default scheme is just not functional for me. But I was willing to hook up a controller for it. I feel like I need to not be playing on my giant controller, my big hand controllers, because I can't hit all the buttons. It's like Tony Hawk is a game that realistically you need to have multiple fingers on your buttons at the same time.
Does it mean you have to dig out an actual PS4 controller?
Or a fight stick.
I'm wondering if I can remap things, because it's really not using the triggers for anything reasonable. And I feel like maybe the triggers would make more sense for grinds and things like that, rather than having to hit face buttons. I'm going to fiddle with it, see if I can remap some stuff. But it is very true to my memories of the game. I don't know how much it actually plays like the game. Although that's to be fair, I have been playing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2 on my RJ350 emulator handheld, and it's a little slower than this game is, but otherwise it feels the same. And I know I've said it before, but those chunky polygon PlayStation 1 games work really well on a handheld system. Because they feel like they're in much more detail than they actually are.
I mean, it's like the thing I said about Evoland. It's you remember FF7 looking and not how it actually looks.
Exactly. FF7 looks real raw now.
It's very blocky.
I mean, I get what they were going for, but yeah. The backgrounds were great. I think that's the thing is in our minds, we remember how cool the pre-rendered backgrounds looked and forget how crappy the character models looked.
Well,
and battle character models, which are quite good.
Yeah.
The battle character models are really good. Yeah. But the overworld models, no.
Even those were not bad compared to everything else.
Exactly. Anyway. That's probably it for the show. I mean, we ran long a couple weeks, so we'll run a little short this week. Any final thoughts? Okay.
We should get more Gundam games here.
We should get more Gundam games here.
We should get more good Gundam games here.
I think we're turning the corner.
Look, we keep asking for things, and that monkey's paw keeps curling fingers. So it's good to be specific.
Something Keen Dreams Definitive Edition.
Why that one? God, why?
Because it's the one that is.
It's the one that Bethesda doesn't have.
Yes.
Yeah. Hey, they're adding new content.
Bethesda, why can't we have nice things? Why do you forget that Keen exists?
They didn't.
I mean, for a single E3.
Oh.
And then seemingly forgot about it again. Anyway. Hopefully you enjoyed the show, and we will see you again next week. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
See you.